listening to Real Guy Radio.
How many pro wrestling news websites do you visit to get your daily news? 3, 4, maybe 5? Do yourself a favor and make that number 1. WrestleChat.net, the only professional wrestling news site that brings you all wrestling news all day long, and is home of the critically acclaimed Still Real to Us podcast, starring former CZW, ROH, and ECW announcer Eric Gargiulo and the champ Jeff Beck. That's WrestleChat.net. WrestleChat, it's where it's at.
It's still real.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome once again to this week's edition of the Still Real to Us Show. November 10th, 2011, episode number 91. 91 straight episodes of the Still Real to Us Show, still kicking some ass. Even when I'm doing it solo style, like in episode number 90. But this week I got someone here to fill in for Eric Gargiulo once again. And he is returning to the program for the first time in quite some time. Oh, by the way, I am the champ, Jeff Beck. But returning back to the Still Real to Us program for the first time in probably, I want to say, close to a year. My friend and yours, Eric Gargiulo, has referred to him as one of the best cell phone videographers of all time, the one and only big-time Benny Lopez. Benny, how are you, my man?
Not bad, not bad. I like the introduction. Definitely glad to be back. Glad to be here for the hot tag, since you went solo last week.
Yeah, I know. It was a one-of-a-kind show. Actually, Benny giving me props. I was very pleased with the people that actually gave me props. I heard nothing negative, which is a good thing, and unless people want to keep it to themselves. But it is the internet, and when people are pissed or hate something, they usually let you know right away. So going solo last week was a task in itself. This week, Benny is in the saddle here, filling in for Eric. Speaking of which, Eric Gargiulo, when he returns to the show, which we are hoping next week, as we are getting closer and closer to our big Thanksgiving show where we talk about the greatest wrestling feuds of all time, we'll actually have a major announcement regarding this show, his involvement in this show, and much more. And we will get that hopefully next week. On next week's show, we'll have a major announcement from Eric Gargiulo, so tune in and check that out. But Benny Lopez in the house, back in the house. I mentioned before, Benny, so I really haven't, like Benny said to me, we dialed each other up here, talk a little bit before the show, and he said it's been a long time. I actually want to say I think the last time I saw Benny, or even talked to Benny, was at Final Battle 2010 in New York City, was at the show. Right? It was Final Battle, right, Benny?
Yeah.
Okay,
That was the last time, besides like little Twitter things here and there.
Yeah.
But
It's been some time there. I know it was the big one, Steen and Generico, and all that stuff. And if Benny remembers, I was with a current famous wrestler's girlfriend, who may be in rehab at that particular show. We won't. You guys could dig into names and figure that one out. But since the last time I've seen you, Benny, you've been a cell phone videographer. We didn't get a chance to get you on during Eric's wedding, but you were there in person. For anybody that could throw back there, what was that? Back in like March, April. You actually, it was via Brett, WrestleChat. Brett sent me this photo from you of you sitting next to Howard Finkel. How was that situation?
It was awesome, man. It was a total surprise. Eric really hooked it up. He seated me and pretty much at the wrestlers table.
Yeah, I know you got stuck with Luke Hawx as well, right?
Yeah. I played chauffeur to Luke for that week. Good times though, man. It was a blast. Howard Finkel, class act. The guy, top notch. talking to everybody. He was awesome.
Let me ask you. I know it's so hard because you don't want to mark out or you don't want to come off like this like cheesy wrestling fan and be like, or like the Chris Farley bit from SNL where it was like, remember the time that you called the match? You know, you announced Bret Hart at WrestleMania 10. But let me ask you. There would be no way that I could sit next to Howard Finkel and not ask him one question. Did you ask him any wrestling-related questions at Eric's wedding?
You know what? I didn't ask too much. He tossed around the idea that he may be writing a book. I definitely told him I think that would be an awesome idea, especially with how much he's been through in wrestling. You know what, Luke Hawks, he's actually got me pretty trained on not marking out in front of wrestlers. He's, thanks to him, I've met a lot of wrestlers, a lot of famous wrestlers, and one of the pieces of advice that he's always given me before you meet them is to try not to mark out. They see that all the time, and it's not that they don't appreciate it, but it's kind of, I guess, bringing bringing work home. So, that was one of the things he told me early on when me and him started being real cool, and it kind of stuck with me. So I try, it's tough. Don't get it twisted. I definitely wanted to talk wrestling, but I held back out of, I guess, respect.
Yeah, I know. I've had those situations before as well with wrestlers I've met at various shows, like Chris Hero and stuff like that. And I don't want to ask them questions like, hey, remember that match you had in 2008 in CZW or something? It's just, and I couldn't agree more. It's so, imagine if somebody was hanging out with you and it's your job and they want to ask you, say Benny's job is cell phone videography, and they're like, hey, man, remember that video you shot for the wedding back in, like, 2006? You're kind of like, yeah, but you don't really want to talk about it. So I completely understand that. That's a great piece of advice from Luke Hawks to Benny, and I think anybody that listens to this show, if you want to be cool with wrestlers or ever get the opportunity to hang out or talk to wrestlers, don't be too much of a mark. I mean, you could throw in a couple questions here and there. I mean, but just don't be like, hey, remember that time you hit the Stone Cold Stunner on The Rock? That was cool, because you kind of sound dorky.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
So, very cool, very cool. So, big time Benny Lopez back in the saddle once again here on the Still Real Tough Show. We have a lot to discuss here, a lot of little stories. There's nothing really major to discuss. So right off the bat here, we're going to talk a little bit about maybe Brodus Clay. Eddie Edwards is the new #1 contender for Final Battle 2011. We'll talk a little bit more about the return of Mick Foley, whether or not you care about Booker T returning to the ring. TNA has signed has their first developmental territory, which is pretty interesting. Their website was hacked. We'll talk a little bit about Chris Hero. But kicking it off this week, Benny, is we're kind of, I guess it's got a borderline, a little bit of the first ever Love Line-ish when it comes to the world of wrestling on this show. This past Monday night on Raw, John Morrison gets his first win in 4 or 5 months, it feels like, against Dolph Ziggler, the current reigning United States Heavyweight Champion, on Monday Night Raw. And then news starts coming out there that he and Melina may be no more. Benny, when we look at this situation, is it safe to say that WWE Creative now has rewarded John Morrison for finally breaking up with Melina by saying, hey, remember that job you used to have and we were going to make you a big-time face on Monday Night Raw? Well, we're going to do that again because you made a right decision. To you as a wrestling fan and somebody that follows wrestling so closely, is that the idea that you're getting right now, is that maybe Jomo is no-mo with Melina?
I was actually looking into this a little bit before we got on. Honestly, I'll know more after next week. If John Morrison is on Raw next week and he gets another win under his belt, then maybe there's a little bit of validness to this. Currently, though, the way it's been lately, I don't think this one win means much. I don't know if it means that he's out of a particular doghouse or not. I just I don't know. I'm not sold yet.
Is this a case where, there's also been another rumor floating around, is that his contract was coming up, and it was coming up around November, December time, according to reports over at WrestleChat.net. Do you think this is more of a case then of him re-signing with the company, or is it, or can we lay this back to him, being no more with Melina?